that only took 5 months. Hey everybody, it's your favorite depressed politic boy back again with another probably useless political video. This month's video, I'm trying to do this as a monthly thing now, but be warned, I am not good with upload schedules. You'll know if you've watched this channel for any amount of time. Today we will be discussing communism, the dictatorship of the proletarian. In this video, we'll be discussing the authoritarian strongman dictatorships of the communist bloc, along with the non-communist bloc like Tito and Mao. In the next video, we'll be discussing more ideal populist communism. In addition, there will be a third video that will probably be shorter, discussing socialism and anarchism. Both are similar to communism, but have very large differences, and just overall are really weird, and anarchism is a whole problem. So anyways, let's get started with Stalinism. Communism is more akin to a religion than any form of political thought, really. Communism seeks to equalize all of its citizens under the state, which is the god of communism. It is the state. I just said that. Where communism seeks to establish a dictatorship of the proletarian, and making basically the people their own gods, Stalinism seeks to establish a dictatorship of the powerful, creating the head of state as really their god. In Stalin's attempt to establish himself as the state, he went against a fundamental base of communist thought. He created a powerful class of elites whose only goal was their own personal power. In the internal workings of the state, power politics ruled supreme. It was an atmosphere of terror and death. That was the wrong tense in the script. RIP. Where communism sought to drag down the oppressors of the poor and downtrodden, Stalinism seeks to replace those elites with the new elitist class under the guise of helping the people, which it really didn't. The vast majority of the authoritarian evil characteristics that we associate with communism usually come from Stalinism, and this is one of the main reasons I wanted to make this video, is I wanted to separate what we normally think as communism from Stalinism, because all of our basic fundamentals like hates of communism, a lot of it comes from Stalin rather than actual like Marx or anyone else. So it's just kind of dangerous whenever your fundamental understandings of an ideology is flawed. Now, there hasn't really been a populist state of communism, so it is understandable as to why Stalinism is our main thing, but communism is not Stalinism, and it's dangerous to ignore certain political thoughts simply because one way that can be perceived was evil and killed millions. A lot of the evil characteristics we also associate did start under Lenin, but they really didn't take off until Stalin. The gulags were established under Lenin. Note, however, that this is not the gulags. They were rather called work camps, and they were predecessors, which were basically gulags, but less harsh, not as many people, and a significantly less death toll. However, they did not reach their peak until that of Stalin's reign. The idea of a cult personality also becomes the strongest under Stalin's authoritarian rule. Lenin did start this, however, it wasn't exactly intentional. He originally only held absolute power due to the fact that they were in constant war with the Germans and then the Russian Civil War. So he just kind of felt that he could not release power within the Union without it falling into shambles. This is my own personal opinion as to why I think he held on to power. It could have been he was just ambitious and won the absolute power, but at that time in his life, I don't really think that fit him very well. But, you know, I could be wrong. I'm definitely iffy on that, so don't take what I say 100% truly. If he did release his absolute power, there was a great likelihood that the Union would fall to shambles, as it was pretty unstable at that point in time. Later in his life, he did naively hold on to power far past what was needed, and instead of letting go of the power and allowing the more democratic and free elements come into the Soviet Union, he instead left a power vacuum that let Stalin fill the void of power, and led to an estimated 5 to 6 million deaths under Stalin. Yet that is not the end. if we factor in foreseeable deaths, such as like starving and preventable causes, the death toll rises to 9 million. Still ignoring those who died during the Second World War, which were some pretty idiotic battles that could have been handled a lot better. So while those aren't factored in, those definitely played a part in how many he actually killed. When you take the entire death toll of Stalin's regime, of all the people he killed for all the reasons, estimated to be about 20 million deaths. Now, this was before the declassification of Soviet Union's files. Note here, I couldn't find post-declassified estimates as a whole. The closest I could find was 5 to 6 million, but they said that was still leaving out some, and I just simply couldn't find the resources in time. Stalinism is really more comparable to an empire than an actual Marxist state. Marxism will be discussed in the next video, as he was more populist. There are some nuances to his thoughts that need their own discussion. Where communism was supposed to be a universal idea, an ideology, Stalinism took a more nationalistic stance. Stalin believed in the idea of socialism in one country. This is the idea that Stalin, or any other strongman, would establish and perfect. That's wrong in the script. He'd basically establish an attempt to perfect a communist-stated society. And then, through the force of conquest, they would make all the other countries around them subservient to their capital, Moscow. Now, you might ask, what does this have to do with nationalism? Well, here's the thing. In Stalin's search for communistic perfection, he believed in the idea of a greater Russian nationalism. This was an idea akin to the Russification during the Russian Empire. It was designed to make those on the border territories assimilate into Russian society. The Mongolians, the Chechens, the Georgians, the Estonians, the Finns, and all the other fringe groups, the Ukrainians, the Belarusians, the Armenians, the Azerbaijanis, the Kazakhs, all that jazz. They would all become Russian under a greater Russian identity. Where Orthodox communism would probably advocate these people have their own unions, and if not that, at least freedom to, not be under his rule. Stalin wished for the people to be directly under his rule. It's also a pretty big difference is that communism was more decentralized than what Stalin enforced. So Stalin really wished for everyone to be ruled under an iron fist at his own hand. He was power hungry, and as far as I can tell, did not care much for the actual ideology that gave him his power. It was an ends to a means rather than a means to an end. So Joseph Broz Tito was the leader of communist Yugoslavia from 1953 to 1980. Tito was kind of a link in between Stalinism and Orthodox communism. He took a lot from Stalin, but it was closer to normal Orthodox communism. Tito inspired brotherhood between all the Yugoslav ethnicities. That would be the Bosnians, the Croats, the Slovenians, the Macedonians, and Serbs, and I guess to a lesser extent the Albanians and the Herzegovinans, and the Austrian Germans. But those weren't major ethnic groups at the time, so, the Albanians were, but anyways. He promoted all this he promoted all of this brothership and nationalism under the idea of that they were all South Slavs. They're all Yugoslavian. And so it straddled a line between a confederation and a national state because him being both a Croat and a Serb, the two main people who hated each other, he really felt for both sides, or maybe felt is the wrong word, but he was in a divide, and he wanted to promote nationalism to bring them together, but he also understood that they were in fact two different national peoples who couldn't really be united unless they had a grander nationalism to unite under, which would be South Slavism. However, they were separate nationalities, so he couldn't really enforce a Serbian or a Croat lifestyle on everyone, so he decided to do South Slav. Um, he Tito was an oppressive authoritarian who would end any dissent and did not stand for people questioning him. However, he was nowhere near as brutal. While you could argue that with the lesser population and everything, he might be similar, but in my own personal opinion, it was nowhere near the brutality. He didn't have the god complex kind of that Stalin had. Tito also never really, as far as my understanding, tried to spread communism like around the world. He rather preferred to focus on internal struggles than looking outwards. Now, since Yugoslavia collapsed so soon, we don't really know if once things had stabilized, if he would have like spread outwards. He also died really before the collapse of Yugoslavia, so it doesn't seem like he would. But once again, nothing is 100%. He could have. But anyways, moving on. Okay, so now we're going to touch briefly on Mao. I don't have a lot of time left, so there's not going to be too much information here. So Maoists were in many ways much more brutal than Stalin. Through policies of starvation and cultural enforcement, the death toll of communist China under Mao's regime reached into the estimated 30 to 80 million deaths. Mao enforced a doctrine of dragging a pre-industrial imperial nation-state, well, not a nation-state, an imperial kind of confederation with a lot of different, not a confederation, an imperial state, into a giant of industry and communism through death, starvation, and oppression. Now, this is one of the things that people often misunderstand about communism. Communism is not an agricultural idea. It requires industry, and a lot of places where communism happened, they were originally agricultural. So a lot of the brutal deaths, especially in the early reign, came through people trying to industrialize. And that just wasn't how communism was supposed to work, so it failed. So yeah, that was my take on Stalinism versus actual communism. As I said, next week we'll have a video. I'm going to be trying to do this monthly, but no promises. I'll see you guys all next time. See ya!